Hi everyone, how are we today? I can't hear you answer, but that's okay. I'm assuming you're all very good today. I'm feeling good today. Thanks for joining us. So today, and I'm going to start my webcam. So hey, how's that? Hey, start sharing. Here we go. Hey, I've got these funky headphones on today. And everything seems to be working. So today is how to embed HTML content into your Captivate projects. And a couple of things that I just wanted to discuss to start off with is that it's a good idea to have a little bit of HTML knowledge. Now, HTML sort of web knowledge is an endless pot of gold, which is exciting, and it opens up so many opportunities for us to take our content to the next level. So normally with Captivate, we are limited by the slide size or the screen size. So for example, here's my Captivate project that I've got here in front of us. And normally we are constricted by the screen size that we have for our slides. So we think that we've got to sort of fit everything within that sort of 1024 by 627 screen size, or even if we're developing for phone, we are restricted to just that phone size. So the whole idea of today is to show you how we can break out of that restriction, and how we can break out of that thought of only being able to accommodate that particular screen size. Now, a couple of you out there, or maybe all of you, have probably used the Web Object feature, which is part of Captivate. I'm just going to go back to my little slide that I created earlier. And basically what I've shown here is a diagram to explain how we can reference or display web content within Captivate. So on the left-hand side here, I've got a diagram which shows us that we have a Captivate slide, essentially, which is defined by the outer box. And then we use Captivate as a window to then display other content, which is normally outside web content, which is defined by a web address which has http:// at the beginning of it. Now, in Webland, for those of you who have delved into web development, that is called an absolute reference link. Now, just to show you that I'm sort of not making this up, I'm just going to quickly switch, and you can do this research in your own time. I'm just going to go to a moz.com site. Even if you just do a search on absolute URL reference, relative versus absolute URL reference, a lot of it will come down to SEO, but it's all relevant to what we're talking about here. So an absolute reference is a link to an actual page which exists as part of a web address. So for example, in my web browser here, the whole web address is what's called an absolute reference. Now, for example, I can take this link, which I've got, or I can take this web address, which I've got in my web browser window. I can copy that web address, and inside Captivate, I can put a web object, which is done by clicking on the Objects button and then clicking on Web. That will create an object which is defined also as an object in our timeline, as you can see there. And when I've got the web object selected, I can go over to the properties panel, and I can just paste that URL that I copied into that field. I just press enter on the keyboard, and if you notice straight away, that URL has now appeared, or that web page has now appeared in my Captivate file. And I did another one here for a Wikipedia page as well. So if I was to now go through and preview this project, so if I click on preview project and open that up, and I'll get my page coming up, and here's my Wikipedia page. Now also, just to bring to your attention, what's happened here is as a web, and I should have tested this particular page earlier, but this is probably a good thing to show. This is a little hurdle that's come up. Don't come across this too many times, but as a web developer, I can actually program within my own web content not to have content displayed in an iframe. So it sort of locks people out from doing this very thing. That's okay. So in this particular example, don't think that you've done something wrong. It's just the actual web developer putting a lock on their content, which is fine. These things happen. What I will do is I'll go back to my Wikipedia example. I'm just going to delete that page. And here I've got a Wikipedia web frame. If I click on this, or if I click anywhere on this slide, you'll now notice that I actually have a web object in there, and I've put a web address, which I've actually just copied and pasted from this Wikipedia site right here. So that's displaying this web page, which is stored somewhere else in the world, and it's showing that web page inside my Captivate file. So that's the general idea of the web object, and that can that's pretty straightforward. Just one other thing that I did want to point out as well, and here's our first tip of the day. So tip of the day right here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in another blank slide, which could be a quiz or a question, which could say, please tell us, or please select a monarch from Brazil, based on the information that they've just read. Now, here's a little bit of a trap that we can fall into when we're dealing with web objects. Let's have a look at this, shall we? Now, if we look, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to preview this project. And when I preview the project, you'll notice that it brings up that's the title slide, which I'll add. Here's my Wikipedia page, and then all of a sudden it disappears. So straight away I've got a bit of a problem whereby it's just gone through to the next slide. A lot of you will probably be aware of what the problem was there. The problem was, actually just before I go any further, I'm just going to put in a title. Let's have a look here. Web objects in Captivate. There we go. The problem with that, with what happened just then, is that this slide goes for 3 seconds. So straight away, it's going to go on to the next slide. So I haven't actually put anything in there to stop that slide and allow the user to actually go through that slide. Now, some of you also may have noticed as well is that, and I'll preview this again, some of you, and I'll point this out now, is we do actually have a play bar down the bottom. So we could tell the user, okay, pause, let them pause it, and then when they're ready, they click play. Now that's probably not a very good user experience. So what we're going to do here is we're going to force a pause on that slide. Okay. Now you might want to do this when you want the web object to take up the whole screen and you don't have room to put extra buttons to allow that navigation to occur. So what I'm actually going to do here is, and as I said, this is tip number 1 of the day, tip of the day for you. On this particular slide, so I don't have anything selected on the slide. I'm just going to click somewhere outside the slide to make sure I'm just looking at the slide properties. Then I'm going to go into actions, and you'll see here that we can actually create some actions or initiate or execute some actions as soon as the user enters that slide. And a small little hero of our actions panel in this particular example is on enter, we are going to pause the slide. So what that's going to do is it's going to pause the slide right there, allow the user to do what they want to do, and then when they're ready, they can continue. So let's have a look and see how we can do that again. So I'm just going to preview the project, and we've got our title, which is great. We go on to the next slide, which is the web object, and you'll notice that it's actually paused, and we can now scroll through that content, and the end user, when they're ready to move on, they can either click play or they can click the next button. Okay, and we'll talk about some different ways that we can present those buttons which would be suitable for a mobile experience. Just on this note, if we were looking at this particular web page on a mobile device, the user would just use their finger to scroll down. So we're now starting to get into this experience where people are experiencing our content as though they are experiencing a normal web page. So they can scroll up and down using their finger on their mobile device. If there is an image, we can click on the image, and you'll notice that that will open up the image still inside that window. If the image is too small for the device, the browser will automatically give us a magnifying glass. We can click on the magnifying glass, and we can now scroll around. Now, it's at this particular point in time that if a user was on a mobile device, they could pinch and zoom those images as well. Now, a particular problem that we've got here, there's actually no way of actually getting out of this image. So this is a little bit of a design flaw of Wikipedia, because I don't think the people at Wikipedia were expecting to have their content embedded within a Captivate file. Unfortunately, there's really no way that we can get ourselves out of this apart from the end user just clicking either play, or they would actually just click the forward button, which would actually take them on to the next slide, which is that slide there. Okay, that's a little bit of a preamble, because first of all, we just wanted to look at, okay, what's the web object normally used for? And the web object is normally used for accessing external web content which is coming from another website. And as I said, that's called an absolute reference, as defined as we're talking about here. So an absolute reference is a full web address. Okay, what we're going to focus on from now on in is we're going to look at creating our own HTML page, which we're going to store locally, and it's actually going to be a relative referenced document. Now, a relative reference document is a document that is just referenced by the page file, or the file name, and any folders that may be created for that content to go into. So, relative referencing as far as our content is concerned. And let's have a quick look to see how we can make this work. So, as I said, a little bit of HTML knowledge goes a long way in this particular example. And what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to switch back to here, because we are achieving the same experience for our end users. We are utilizing the same tool or the same feature, which is called the web object, but this time the content is stored locally relative to our Captivate file, or ultimately relative to the published content. And this is going to be quite important. So what I've done is I've set up my own folder, which is currently an empty folder. And I'm going to put this, I'm going to actually, this untitled document that I've created so far. Actually, let's start again. I'm just going to not save that. Let's go through the from scratch. And I'm going to create a responsive project because we want this experience to be viewed on a mobile phone as well. So I'll create a responsive project. Straight away, that opens up. And what I'll do straight away after this all loads is I'm going to save this file into my brand new folder. So this file and all of the relative HTML content that we create will sit in the same location, all relative to the Captivate file and the published content. So I'm just going to save this document inside this folder, and here it comes, and that's taking me into that folder. So I'm just going to call this web object, and I'll save that. And now if we go back to my folder, there's the Captivate file stored right there. Okay, now I'm going to actually open Dreamweaver because that's my preferred tool for web authoring, but I'm actually not going to use it. I'm just going to open it up because I'm going to reference a couple of things in a minute, so I'll just keep that open in the background. But if you don't have an HTML web authoring tool, I can recommend a website called codepen.io. And for free, you can go in and it gives you a real-time HTML coder and viewer. So for example, we've got HTML, we've got CSS, and we've got JavaScript, for example. We're not going to do any or much JavaScript today, but we are going to do some HTML. So for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating an HTML page here. So for those of you who know HTML, it's just basically made up of tags. They're very, very simple. What I can do here is I can create a heading. So for example, a heading is H1 tag. So that's like a heading 1. If for those of you who use Microsoft Word, it's exactly the same as doing heading 1. And these are all built-in HTML tags that are part of the tool set and as part of the protocol that is HTML. Welcome to Captivate Web Objects. And then I'll close that H1 tag, and you'll notice that as I'm creating the HTML, it's giving me a real live view as to what that content will look like if viewed through a browser. I'll just press enter. To create a paragraph, I'll just put in a P tag for paragraph, and save me typing some stuff out and you spending 5 minutes watching me type something out. I'm going to go to my favorite text generator. Some of you may have heard of Lorem Ipsum. It's a way of getting dummy text or just fill in text. But here's some funny Lorem Ipsum generators. There's Bacon Ipsum, and I'm going to go to Chuck Norris Ipsum. So what this allows you to do is just go and grab some text to, oh, that one's not available. I'll close that one down. I'll go back to the Bacon one because it's at the top of the list. Bacon Ipsum. And what you can do is you can say, okay, I want 5 paragraphs of text. Sorry for all you vegetarians out there. I'm going to grab some text. So here we go. Here's some just some random text. So I can copy this text. I'll go back to my code pen, and just after the P tag, I can just paste that in, and then I'll close the P tag. And you'll notice that straight away it's giving me that that look there. I'm going to put in another paragraph because I do need to distinguish the paragraphs here. So these Ipsum generators are good if you want to create a prototype and you don't have any real content yet, but you need some text just to show people, oh, this is what it's going to look like. So I've selected that, I copied it, Control C for copy, and my opening P tag. You'll notice that I put in a closing P tag there, which is /P. For those of you who want to do some HTML learning, a good place to start is w3schools.com, and you can learn HTML, and there's all some really cool stuff in there. I go back to this site quite a bit just to remind myself, how do I do that again? I haven't done that for a while. Okay, so we'll paste that there. I'm going to close that tag again, and you'll now notice that I've got two paragraphs and a heading. Now, here's the thing. How can I get this content into my own HTML page? Good question. I'm glad you asked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my folder where I have my Captivate file. And by the way, I want to do everything using free tools, apart from Captivate, obviously. So what I'm going to do here is inside Windows, I can right mouse click, I can go to New, and I can go to even go to Text Document, which is fine. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to call this Web Contents.html. So I can just actually create my own HTML file from there. And then if I want to edit that, I can just right mouse click again. I can go to Open With, and I can just choose Notepad. Thinking that not all of you will have Dreamweaver, or not all of you will have a web authoring tool. But here we've got a web-based one. So I can just take this content that I've written in the HTML. I can click in there, Control A for all, or select all there. I can copy that content. I can go back to my Notepad file, which has got the .html extension. I can paste that in. I'll just get rid of that heading there. And I'm going to save that as an HTML file. I'll close that down, and then if I go back to my folder where I've got all my project information, my Captivate file, there's the HTML document, and I'm actually going to double click on that file just to have a quick look at it and have a look at it in a browser. So I'll double click on that content that I just created, and you'll now notice that's opened up in a browser, and you'll see my web address up here is file, and it's going into the address, but it's basically a web page. So I've created a web page ready to go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is how do we get this web page that we've created? So as I said, I'm focusing on our local web content that we're creating. How do we get that into Captivate? Good question. I'm glad you asked. So what we're going to do is I'll close this down. I'll close this down. I'll close this down. Oh, that's a little bit of a surprise. We'll get to that in a minute. And this file here, webcontent.html, currently it's relative to the Captivate file. So if I go into Captivate, and here's my Captivate file, I'll just web objects in Captivate. It's great. Okay, I'm going to put in a brand new page, a brand new slide. I'm going to use good old fluid boxes here, so I'm just going to put in one fluid box. That's fine. Don't worry too much about fluid boxes at the moment. There's lots of information out there at the moment about fluid boxes, but I've just put in one just to make sure that this content will actually respond nicely in different devices, and it's going to take up the whole page. So there's my fluid box. While I've got it selected, I'm going to go through the Objects button and then Web. By default, it always brings up this website, and you'll notice that when I put the web object in, it doesn't quite go to the edge. So what I can do here is it's actually inside a fluid box. So this web object is currently inside a fluid box. And the way you can tell that is if I try and resize it from the corner, I can't, because the whole idea of a fluid box is it just, or the content inside a fluid box is the fluid box takes over the content that's inside there. So you don't have a lot of control over size and position. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to take the tick off maintain aspect ratio, and that forces the content to fill the fluid box. Okay, now let's have a quick look to make sure that this is all working. I like to preview a lot. I like to preview, so preview project, and let's have a look and see. There's my web objects in Captivate, and then it goes on to the web page, which should load, which is that Wolfram web page. Currently not loading. Well, oh, there it is. There you go. So there you go. So I've now got that web page inside. How do we get my or our own content in there? Are you ready? It's as easy as getting the file name, which is webcontent.html, and putting it in the address. So webcontent.html, and then pressing enter. And that's it. Now that's a relative URL. Now the reason that Captivate knows to look there is because I've just put the file name in there, and it's looking for that file relative to where the project is, and it's right next door. It's actually in the same folder. So that's why we can make reference to that content just by putting in the name of the file, like so. Now, here's a little bit of a trap. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and we're going to preview that content. And what can happen is the content doesn't come up as being displayed. So here's a trap. It's not broken. It's just the way that the web works, that it won't show in this particular environment. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to publish this file. And the only way that we can really properly test this out is to publish our Captivate file. So it's a little bit of an issue. However, let's have a look and see how this works. So I'll just go back into here. I'm just going to put a space in there because that's annoying me. And we're now going to publish this content. So let's go into File and Publish. And we're going to publish it into the same folder where we've got all of our other project content. So I'm just going to paste that file path in there. I'm not going to zip it yet because we're not going to put it up into a LMS just yet, but we are going to publish it, HTML5, ready to go. So let's click on, I'm actually going to turn mobile gestures off as well, because mobile gestures can get in the way of trying to interact with the web content that you've got in there. And we'll have another webinar just on mobile gestures sometime soon, but I'm going to turn that off for a minute. Let's publish, and for those of you who have published without zipping, you'll know that it actually goes into another folder. So I'm just going to publish that, and I'm not going to view the content just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my folder, and you'll notice that publishing it actually created another folder. So are we now ready for trap number 2? Because this is a trap and I don't want you to think it's broken. Are you ready? So we're going to open up the web project, and this index.html file is the file that contains our whole Captivate published project. So if I double click on this, and there's web objects in Captivate, and onto the next slide, and it's broken. Okay, it's not working. Can anyone tell me why it's not working? You get a lolly if you can. I'll email it to you. If you can tell me why the web object is not working. Save ourselves a little bit of time. I will tell you. Oh, hello, Dana. What's happening? Dana. Oh, what's happening? Oh, Dana, have you got the answer to the question as to why it's not working? Or does anyone know why this may be not working? And the trick is, oh, here we go. We've got some people coming in. Anyone tell me why I can't view that web content? And I'll give you a clue. It's all about relative. The part of Navia, you get a gold star. I'll email you the star. And anyone else is coming in? Yes. So it's the path to the HTML file. Because we've published it, the publish project is looking for that file right next to it relative to the content. So what we need to do is we need to go back into our project folder, and I'm just going to copy this content into the folder, and I'm just dragging, holding the control key down, so copy to web object. So that's great. So there's now, that file is now inside this folder, and you'll see here webcontent.html is now inside the folder, and it's next to the published content. Let's have a look and see if this has actually fixed it. Are you ready? So we're going to publish it, or we're going to open up the, and you'll notice I didn't have to republish the Captivate file. So hopefully some of you might be starting to get some ideas about, hey, if we have information that is constantly updating, we don't actually have to go into Captivate, update it in Captivate, and then republish it all the time. We just have to update the HTML file and then just pop it back into the folder. We may need to re-upload the zip file into our LMS, but I'll be ready. I need a drum roll, please. Drum roll, please. Open up index.html. I am keeping my fingers crossed because, as you know, sometimes things... And there we have it. So our HTML document that we created, stored it locally, it's now visible inside our Captivate object. Excellent. Well done, team. We're getting there. So the next thing that we're going to look at is how do we work with images? Good question. I'm glad you asked. So I've got a couple of images that I'm going to use here. For those of you who remember Happy Days, I always call on the Happy Days example, and I might actually grab this this learning one. So I'm just going to copy these images. I'm going to put them back into the main project file. Okay. Now here's the thing. It's probably tempting to start putting in a folder and call this one images, and then put the images inside of there, and so forth, so on and so forth. The problem with that is it can start getting a little bit confusing when you've got objects or assets that you're referencing in the HTML file in other folders, which you then want to ultimately put in here as well. So just to keep things really simple, what I've tended to do is I'll just keep all of my assets and the HTML content all next door to each other and keep it all relative, and it just makes it easier to fix any linking problems that might occur further down the track. So let's have a look and see how this works. I might actually rename that one Happy Days, because that'll make it easier to reference. And I'm going to rename this one Storytelling. Okay. Now going back to my HTML file, which I created before, and I'm going to actually, where are we? Here we go. I'm actually going to now edit the Notepad file. So I'll open this back up. I'll open with Notepad. Now, for those of you who have done HTML, thank you, Dana, for the drum roll, virtual drum roll, excellent. For those of you who've worked with HTML, to put in an image, all we do is we open up what's called an image tag, and then we just put in src for source, and then we say the source equals, and that's not tomato sauce or soy sauce, that's source, source, and I'm going to say happy days dot, and what was that one again? It's a JPG file. So .jpg, close the double quote, and then close the close that like that. I think that's like that. Let me just quickly double check. No, there's a little. I think it works if you have that in there, whether you have that in there or not. So I'll just put that in there. This is one of those rare HTML tags that doesn't actually have a closing tag. So just be mindful of that. Okay, let's save that. Now, because I've saved that and updated my working copy, I now need to drag that back inside the published Captivate file. I'm going to replace that file, And just to let you know, obviously we need the Happy Days file as well. So let's copy that in, because actually let's open that up from here. There's our image, which we're just opening up directly from our project folder. But if we try to open up the web content folder from within inside our published folder, you'll now notice that I've got a broken link. So what I need to do there is I need to take the Happy Days image and put that inside the published folder, double checking to make sure that that web content works. So there it is. Now the ultimate test is it going to work inside Captivate? Glad you asked. Now you notice that I haven't republished the Captivate project, which is a good thing. So all I can do is I can go back in here, I can open up the published Captivate file again, and drumroll, and there it is. So we're now starting to build our own web content inside Captivate. And if we make it responsive, uh-oh, what's happened here? The image is a particular size and it's forcing the web content to break outside of that device viewing boundaries. So here's a little tip that we're going to put in now. We need to just define some dimensions of the image. So I'm going to go back into my HTML file that I'm creating. I'm going to open with Notepad, and all we do here is we put in width equals 100% and height equals 100%, surrounded by quotes. And if you get, I get stuck on this all the time. So if you get stuck, you can always go back to W3 Schools. You can search for IMG tag. The IMG tag is here, and you'll notice that here's the code for an IMG tag. If you just put in a number without the percentage, that's literal pixel height. So you just want to be careful of that, especially if you're creating responsive content. So we've actually put the dimensions in as percentages, making sure also that we spell height and width correctly, because I sometimes get my I and E mixed up. I'm going to save that, and I did actually, I just broke my rule of thumb. I actually updated the HTML file inside the published file. I always like to make sure that I have, there we go. I always like to make sure I'm normally working on my working copy, which is inside the project folder, and then once I've tested that, I then copy that back into the published folder. So let's have a look at that. So just double checking, and I think that came up. There we go. So look at that. It's responsive. So you notice that the image is, oh, what have I done here? Did someone pick up on that? Maybe I left out what did I put, 1000% in there, perhaps? What did I do? That shouldn't be looking like that. Notepad, 100% height, width. That all looks okay. Interesting. Okay, that's all right. We'll have a look at that in a minute. But let's go back into our Captivate file, and hopefully we will start getting a proper responsive. There we go. So there's the Happy Days photo inside Captivate. If I now make this responsive, for some reason I can't explain why it's doing that, but you'll notice that it's at least the width is going like that. Let's have a quick look and see what maybe if I need to put width and height around the other way. Interesting. Small trap for seasoned players as well. Let's try that. I'm going to put that in here, width and height. I'm not sure why that's happening. Anyway, these things happen. Let's try the PNG. I'm going to put the PNG file, and just to save ourselves a little bit of time, I'm just going to copy these paragraphs. I'm going to put the PNG. I think PNGs are actually a little bit more accommodating when it comes to resizing objects or resizing the image. So I'm just going to take that full path. So I just copied that file name, put inside the image source, and I'll save that. And let's have a look. Obviously, I need to recopy those assets back into my published folder. And you'll notice that the whole time I haven't had to republish the Captivate file. Okay, let's have a look at our web content again. Here we go. Scroll down. There's my PNG file, and you'll now notice that for some reason, I really don't know why this is doing this. Thank you. I've just had a moment, aha moment. Okay, here's the thing. What we've done here is we have created an HTML content, but we haven't sort of put the stock standard HTML tags around the outside. We started straight with H1, and we haven't really told it that it's an HTML document. Now, for those of you who've done development, we need to define the document type. So this is all sort of standard sort of HTML 101 stuff when you're creating your own HTML document. So I'm actually going to just copy and paste this information at the top, because this is all stock standard stuff which doesn't change. So I'm actually going to put that at the top here. What I do also need to do, and this is, you really, if you don't know HTML, please do yourself a favor, do some HTML research and some study, and then we need a body, and I'm going to close the body tag down here because that's what we need to do. And then we also need to close the HTML tag as well. So right down the bottom, we put in HTML. So this is our stock standard HTML file. Now I'm going to recopy that back into here. Now, fingers crossed, I am hoping that this will fix the problem and it's not going to be confused. Let's try that again. So here's my, and if, there we go, look at that, see? So you saw the trap, I fell into the trap, we were able to fix the trap together. We need to tell the HTML document that it is actually an HTML document. The file extension just doesn't cut it these days. We need to put those surrounding tags. So you'll notice that our images are all nice and responsive as well, and we can start to create this web experience inside Captivate, and we're not bound by the slide size. We can extend our content. A couple of other things that we're going to look at here is, say for example, we're looking at this image on a phone and we want people to be able to explore that image in a lot more detail. Unfortunately, you can't actually, you know how when you're on a phone, just pretend that's a phone and you sort of go like that to zoom in, you can't actually do that in Captivate. So, or you can't do that when the HTML content is inside the Captivate Web Object. So we've got a little bit of a hack for this. I've been told I'm not allowed to use the word hack, but that's okay. Shh, don't tell anyone. And what we're going to do here is, all we need to do is we need to put in what's called an href to that image. So we're going to allow people to click on the image or tap with their finger on the image, and the image will be a link to itself, which will open up the image in a new window. So we just put in what's called an href tag, and even I still forget this. We want to just make sure the href tag is going back to. Sorry, I'll put that down the bottom, down here for our storytelling. So hopefully you guys can see that. I'll just make that a little bit bigger so you can get that. We'll make these files available as well on our website. So href, we're going to link that image back to itself to open up in a full screen. And we've also got this option where we want the image to open up in a new tab. We don't want people to navigate away from that page. So what we do here is we do what's called target, and we've got what's called _blank. And what that does is it forces the image to open up in its own, and I need to put a in front of that. That's right. So that's href. And then right at the end here, we've got a closing a tag. So that's basically how you create a link to something. And this is creating a link back to itself, opening up in a new tab in the browser, so they can go and explore the image, close the tab down. We might even put something like click the image to open up in new browser window to explore further, something like that. There's our paragraph. Okay, so there's our content there. Once again, dragging that HTML content. Oh, I think I just did it again. Did I just break my? Yep, I did. So I updated the HTML file. Sorry, I updated the HTML file inside the published folder, which is against my very kudos. So I'm just going to go back out and update the working file inside the project. So these are my project related files, and then working on my content in the project file, and then copying that back into my published document. There we go. So I'm just quickly going to test this out again. So I open up index, and now if we scroll down, click the image to open up a new browser window to explore further. You'll now notice I'm getting a hand on top of the image. If I click on that, and it broke again. What's going on? Target new. I always get blank and new mixed up. There we go. Sorry about that, team. Web content.html, open with Notepad. Go back down here, target new. And also, I did leave out an equals here. There we go. So href equals the image and then target in the new window. I think blank works as well, actually. But the thing that was broken was I didn't put the equals sign in there. So let's recopy that back into the published folder. So this is where our published Captivate, and I haven't republished the Captivate file at all. I'm going to double test that again. Those of you know the what it means to publish and preview all the time. Clicking on that, and now that's opened up in a new window, which is actually inside the Captivate file, which is what we didn't want. We wanted that in a new browser window. So let me see if I can quickly figure out what the, don't you love it when it's put on the spot in front of an audience of lots and lots of people. So, if anyone out there sees anything that I might have missed, storytelling PNG target equals new, IMG source a. Did I close my a tag? Interesting. Okay. I won't spend too much time, but what I did want to point out is something that we prepared earlier. This is actually an example of something which has a similar type of situation, just to show you that this does actually work. This is an embedded HTML document inside a Captivate object. If I click on the image, you'll notice that it has actually opened up inside a new browser. So without taking up too much time to figure out if I haven't dotted an I or crossed a T in there, it does actually work. What we'll do also is we'll put the actual code for the content that works up on our website, and you can download that as a starting point. Just another thing that we will actually look at is embedding video. So if we were to go to YouTube and just embed a video, and I think we've got about 5 minutes left, So you may want to embed some videos. Ed Sheeran, okay, if you really have to. First video there. So I'm going to get the embed code. So here we go, the embed code. So you can just take the embed code, which is an iframe. You can take all these out, blah, blah, blah. So there's your YouTube video. If we take the iframe and we put that inside of our HTML, I'm just going to put it between a couple of paragraphs. So if I update that, I close that down. Just quickly double check something here. It's easy to, so there's my iframe with the YouTube video in it. And I just want to make sure that I've updated this. Okay, I'm actually just going to put blank there because I'm pretty sure that it's blank. What have I written here? Oh no, it's new there. Oh well, these things happen. Oh well, I'll try blank, see what happens. Okay, so I've put the YouTube content in there. I'm going to copy that back into my published folder. So copy that, replace. Let's go in and double check. Now there's another trap that we're going to fall into here, and this is a YouTube thing whereby if we display you'll notice that the YouTube video isn't responsive, so it's not filling up the whole screen. And if I make this smaller and I'm looking at it on a mobile device, it's doing something similar to what the image did to start off with. So once again, this is a little bit of a hack that we need to apply. If all you need to do is just do a search on YouTube responsive embed, but we've done that for you. And this is where we need to just know what's called a little bit of CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It gives us control over how content is displayed in the HTML file. So I'm actually going to grab this style code, which I actually created earlier. And what we need to do, this is CSS code, so I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to put that into my HTML content here. So open with Notepad. This goes up into the head of the HTML document. So I'm just going to paste that into there. And what we're looking for here is, this is to do with what's called a div. And a div in HTML is a container that you can put stuff and have control over it. And the name of that div is going to be called video responsive. So if we go back down to our YouTube video, I'll just make a little bit of room here. So we're just going to say that's a div and it's got a class of, because that's a class. I can't recommend enough. Do yourself a favor, do some HTML and CSS, because it opens up lots and lots of really cool stuff that you can do. So just to double check, make sure I get that code right. There you go. So div class video responsive, closing div. You can keep the width and height in there. That's fine. I'm going to save that. I'm going to copy that back into my published folder, and I will open that up. I'll open up the index.html, and here's the new version of that web content with the responsive YouTube content. And you'll now notice that that YouTube video is responsive as well. So just a little bit of a sort of a hack, I guess, and you can just click on that, play the video inside the content, and you're now creating a much more of a web experience inside Captivate. Last but not least, we've got 30 seconds to go. Once again, if we had another slide after here, which could be a quiz slide, or could be something that says the end, and of course just a little bit of a test. How do we get the slide to stop if we are the end? How do we get the slide to stop if we are viewing web content? And of course, we need to put a action of pause on that particular slide. And what we also need to do now, because we've changed the Captivate file, we do need to republish it. Now, warning, this is your #1 warning of the day, the ultimate #1 warning. When we republish it back into this folder, what it's going to do is it's going to completely delete and wipe out those other files that we've got in there. That's why we need to keep those working files separate, just outside of the published file, the published Captivate file. So I'm going to publish this, click on publish. File already exists. Do you want to override it? Yes, it's going to the same location. And I'm not going to click that there. And you'll now notice that if we go back into that published folder, you'll notice that all of those files have gone that we were copying in there. So that's why we just now need to go back and get our supporting HTML and image files. We just copy those back into here. They're now back in here. You'll notice that we just copied them in there. And then we open up the index.html file, and hopefully, because we put the pause in there, you'll notice that the timeline has paused. It now gives people a lot of time to go through and view that content. Let's see if this works. That didn't quite work. That's okay. I will fix that. I'll have that fixed for you. But then, of course, because we've paused it, when they're ready, they can now click to go on to the next slide. Also, just to let you know that you could incorporate another fluid box in here, or you can add another fluid box or add buttons to have your own navigation in there. For example, we could just put in a shape that's inside the slide, so it's just moving the so it's the button. That's a button inside the content, so we could maybe use that as a button, and then the action could be go to next slide. Now the thing with this particular example, I'll just quickly republish this to show you how it looks like. I'll put a button on the actual slide itself. I'm going to take the play bar or the play controls off. That border always seems to look like it's still there. So now the control of the slide is by the button, not by the pause here. So I'm actually going to take this this particular one off. No action, just to return that back to normal. I need to republish this just to test that out. So let's have a look, see how this looks. Republish. Click yes for that. And of course, not forgetting, because we've republished it, it has completely deleted all of those other files that are in there. So we just need to go back in, copy those back in there. They're now in there, which is good. Let's open up the index.html of our published. Let's have a look and see what it looks like with the button inside the slide. So that's okay. That's a different experience if you wanted to do that. But you'll notice that the web content still actually is allowing people to scroll up and down, but the next button is within the actual Captivate file itself. When you come back next time, we're going to look at, and there is a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 4. We'll be going all the way into next year to expand on this, but I'm going to show you how we can get the continue button inside the actual HTML document. So when they scroll all the way to the bottom, they have to get to the bottom in order to click forward. But hopefully that's giving you some ideas on how you can expand the display of your content without being restricted to the actual slides within Captivate. Do yourself a favor, please do some HTML, do some CSS, get into JavaScript. It's the future. Captivate is the future. And thank you very much. So I know this, why would we use it for this and not Adobe Muse, so we don't have to code? Very good question. So the reason you're using Captivate is, that's a question, why we're using Captivate. If this needs to go to an LMS, so for example, thanks for reminding me, if I need to publish this as a zip file, so let's publish this ready to go onto an LMS, and I'm going to publish, obviously I'll turn my e-learning output on. So we need to upload this to an LMS. We need people to be able to view this via a learning management system. So enable, actually I'll turn that off because I'll leave it on. That's right. Zip file. Now what we can do here, couldn't delete folder. I'll put it into, sorry, just take that out. Publish. Oh no, no, it's all breaking. The world is breaking. Here we go. Oh. So the gremlins have got me. This it doesn't always happen. I don't know why it's happening now. Actually, what I'll show you. Sorry about this, team. Let's just try something else. I'm just going to take. I think I'd do it. No, yeah, maybe. I'll just take this off. So if you did have a zip file, I've never seen this happen before, but it's happening today, obviously, because I'm trying to demonstrate something. Yes. No. Anyway, sorry. Answer to your question, Evan, is if you needed to put this onto an LMS, you create the zip file, and then you would need to make sure that, and I've just lost all my project files, that's okay. You need to make sure all those project files were dragged into the zip file after it's been zipped. So that's the key there. Just to show you something that we prepared earlier, and that is, I've even, I don't know, maybe I think my computer's been taken over by gremlins. But look, let's wrap that up. We'll make sure all of that code and all of those source files are available for you to download and have a bit of a play with. But hopefully you've got some good ideas there as well. So any other questions? Happy to take them now or get in touch. We'll be hanging around a bit, so I'll hand over to Gretel. Actually, I think I'm handing over to Gretel. So bye everyone. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Thanks so much, John. I think everyone learned a lot in that session.
Thanks.
I just wanted to let everyone know that we do facilitate training one-on-one and courses. So you can pop over to our website to see how we can help you if you do need training or you have any questions in relation to Adobe Captivate. We also recommend that everybody upgrades to the 2017 version because it has a lot of new sort of features. And we actually also provide a demo of that on our website as well. So if you wanted to have a bit of a play and see what new features are in the 2017 version, that can also be found on our website. Everything from the webinar today will be included on our resources page, which includes the links and some of the code, and also a recording of this webinar. So if you have any questions, please let us know. But thank you, everyone. We'll stay online for sort of the next 10 minutes. Yeah, thank you for joining us today.